Okay, let's just jump right in. Imagine a massive federal program. We're talking the largest food assistance program in the entire country, where somehow failure is rewarded.
Right.
And because of that, taxpayers are losing over $10 billion every single year. Not because of a bad economy, but because the states running the program, well, they have absolutely no direct financial reason to protect the money.
And that $10 billion figure, that's really the core of our deep dive today. That's the annual cost of what they call improper payments in the SNAP program.
Food stamps, basically.
Exactly. And that includes everything from, simple administrative errors and waste to outright organized fraud and benefit theft. The national error rate hasn't just stabilized, it's actually surged. It hit nearly 12% by 2023.
12%. So just to put that in perspective for you, that means roughly $1 out of every 8 spent on food assistance is being misdirected or wasted or just plain stolen. And what's so fascinating here and kind of infuriating is that the federal government pays 100% of the benefit cost, while the states are left to handle all the messy day-to-day administrative work.
So there's no skin in the game for the states.
None. And when the incentive structure is that broken, the integrity of the whole system just, falls apart.
And if we dig into that 10 billion number, you have to realize it represents two pretty different kinds of failure. A huge portion is, like you said, administrative waste, states just failing to properly check income or residency.
Okay.
But about $1 billion of that loss is from specific criminal activity benefit trafficking, which is the illegal sale of benefits for cash, and this massive growing crisis of benefit theft through card skimming and cloning.
So our mission today is to really unpack the specific structural flaws that are causing this astronomical fiscal drain. We're going to look at the staggering differences in how states perform. I mean, why are some states so efficient while others are just hemorrhaging money?
And the political fight.
And the political and legal war that's being fought right now over federal accountability and data transparency. This is where it gets really interesting. So let's look at the trajectory of this problem because it just defies logic.
Yeah.
The national overpayment rate, it's gone up every single year since 2013.
Every single year.
But here's the puzzle. Between 2012 and 2023, spending on what they call program integrity activities, the federal effort to stop this leakage, it's skyrocketed by 350%.
We're spending more to fix it.
We're spending almost 4 times as much trying to fix the program, so why is the error rate still climbing year after year?
Well, that really raises a huge question about how that money is being spent, right? It tells us that just throwing more money at integrity isn't solving the root cause, which is so often systemic failure or, frankly, mismanagement at the state level. I mean, when we talk about these improper payments, the lion's share of that $10 billion, it's administrative error. It's a state caseworker failing to verify income, or systems that just calculate benefits wrong. It leads to overpayments to people who might not even know they're getting the wrong amount.
So it's more like fiscal negligence than criminal intent in most of these cases.
Precisely. That's the key difference between waste and fraud. The negligence costs taxpayers billions. But then you have the outright criminal stuff, the benefit trafficking, and this huge jump in theft from card skimming. Criminal organizations are targeting these systems now because the security is decades behind what you'd see in a normal bank.
And the human side of that skimming crisis is just critical. I mean, to put those numbers in perspective, data from early 2023 through March 2025 shows New York leading the country with 151,000 theft claims.
151,000.
Totaling over $80 million lost. California is next with nearly 86,000 claims and 38 million lost.
And these are not just abstract stats. Those claims, they represent thousands of vulnerable families who wake up and suddenly find their grocery money for the month is just gone.
Right.
Often just days after their benefits were loaded. The system is just easy pickings for organized crime. And now the cost to the victims is even worse, because the USDA ended its policy of federally reimbursing stolen SNAP benefits. Congress didn't fund it.
So what does that mean for the victims now?
It shifts the whole financial burden onto the states. State governments now have to use their own administrative funds to replace those stolen benefits. If they don't, the victims just lose out.
So it forces them to finally have some skin in the game.
Exactly. It's painful, but it forces state officials to finally feel the fiscal pain of their own security failures. It puts a direct mandatory cost on their poor oversight.
And this whole issue of who pays versus who manages, it brings us right back to that core structural flaw we mentioned. The federal government pays 100% of the food benefits, but the states are totally responsible for administration and checking eligibility.
And as critics argue, that's just a recipe for fiscal disaster. State officials have very little built-in incentive to aggressively cut down on errors or to crack down on fraud when, they're not the ones paying for the benefits themselves.
And the result is this disparity in management that is just shocking.
It is. It looks less like a single national program and more like, I don't know, different managers running independent franchises of the same national chain. Some are incredibly competent, and others are just in a total administrative freefall. You can see it clear as day in the fiscal year 2024 error rate data.
Okay, so let's highlight some of the extremes here. The national average error rate is around 10.9%. But the high performers, or I should say the fiscal drains, are just staggeringly bad. Alaska, for example, is at a 24.66% error rate.
And that's after it hit an absolutely absurd 57% back in fiscal year 2022.
57%.
I mean, think about that. In 2022, more than half of every single dollar going out in Alaska was either the wrong amount or went to someone who wasn't even eligible. Now, 24% is an improvement, but it still means $1 in $4 is misspent.
And it's not just Alaska.
No. The District of Columbia is at 17.38%. Georgia is at 15.65%. New York, 14.09%. These are massive administrative failures, costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars.
So does this huge disparity suggest that the problem is, fundamentally solvable? Or are those low error states just different somehow?
Oh, it absolutely proves it's solvable.
Yeah.
The fact that some states are so efficient just removes any excuse for the worst performers. South Dakota, for example, they maintain one of the lowest error rates in the country at just 3.28%.
Wow.
Idaho is at 3.59%. Wyoming is at 5.12%. These states show that competence and efficiency are achievable when you actually make it a priority.
But doesn't the federal government try to enforce compliance on these states with, financial penalties?
They do, yes. The USDA is required to assess penalties on states whose error rates go above the national average. It's the mechanism designed to force change. For instance, Oregon got hit with a $15.7 million penalty for its 16.7% error rate in 2023.
But is that enough?
Well, that's the question. When a state like New York is losing far, far more than that through just sheer error and fraud, you have to wonder if a $15 million fine is really enough to make a state with that size budget completely reorganize its system. The cost of failure is still way lower than the cost of fixing the problem.
This push for real accountability, it really escalated when the federal government tried to centralize data to get a definitive handle on the fraud problem. The Trump administration issued this unprecedented demand for states to turn over huge amounts of sensitive recipient data names, social security numbers, benefit amounts, going all the way back to 2020. The justification was, we have to do this to root out the waste and abuse the states are missing.
And this immediately set up a huge, highly politicized battle. Transparency versus privacy. The federal government's view was that this was necessary because you can only find things like people getting benefits in multiple states or people getting benefits after they've died through this kind of massive centralized data cross-checking.
But a lot of states pushed back hard.
They did. Many Democratic-led states just refused to comply. They argue the demand for all this sensitive, personally identifiable information was unlawful. Their core concern was that the data could be used for things outside of SNAP eligibility, like, say, tracking immigration status.
So it became a political fight.
Exactly. A political fight over the potential misuse of data ended up shielding administrative incompetence from any federal scrutiny.
And the states that refused, they won a temporary victory, right? They got a court order blocking the USDA from punishing them.
They did. But the data that was collected from the 27 states that complied, it provided stunning validation for the federal government's higher goal.
Okay, so what did it find?
The initial findings were, frankly, alarming. This preliminary review gave concrete evidence of widespread systemic failure. It found 300,000 potential instances of deceased individuals still enrolled and receiving benefits.
Wait, 300,000 deceased recipients still collecting taxpayer money?
300,000. It's staggering. They also found nearly 4,000 disqualified individuals who were still getting payments. and over 500,000 instances of dummy Social Security numbers being used to enroll people.
So the review confirmed it.
It confirmed that significant fraud and abuse was rampant and had been completely missed by the individual state systems. It basically proved that without federal centralized oversight, billions will just keep flowing to people who aren't eligible.
So this constant tension between state failure and federal cost, it leads us right to the main policy solution that fiscal conservatives favor: mandating real cost sharing.
Right.
The idea is if states have to fund even a small portion of the SNP benefits themselves, say 5 or 10%, they immediately get a direct financial interest in stopping fraud. It makes fighting waste an imperative, not a choice.
And that is the sound public policy framework. If you have to bear some of the cost, you're going to demand efficiency. But what's fascinating here is how quickly politics can just undermine even the best-intentioned reforms. A huge controversy erupted recently around a specific provision that was slipped into a major tax and spending bill. Critics call it an absurd policy loophole.
Okay, so explain the absurdity for us. What did this provision do?
The provision specifically exempted states with persistently high error rates, so anyone above 13.3%, from that new cost-sharing requirement for 2 years.
Your kid.
It's the definition of a perverse incentive. The states that are the absolute worst managers, the ones costing taxpayers the most, they get rewarded by being allowed to continue getting 100% federal funding for their benefits.
So let me get this straight. A state like Georgia or New York with a massive error rate gets a 2-year free pass to keep mismanaging things.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, a state that's doing pretty well but is maybe just under that 13% line is forced to start paying its share.
That's it. And critics rightly point out that this structure actually encourages poor performance. It tells administrators, hey, if you let your error rate get high enough, you get a reward. It completely guts the entire principle of shared accountability. It is one of the most astonishing structural failures in recent memory.
Okay, so beyond the cost-sharing politics, what technical fixes could stop the bleeding immediately? Let's start with the cross-state fraud.
We have to close the massive loophole of duplicate enrollment. There's a federal system called the National Accuracy Clearinghouse, or NAC, designed to stop people from illegally getting benefits in multiple states at the same time.
Sounds great.
But here's the problem. Right now, only 7 states have even joined. To make the NAC work, it has to be mandatory in all 50 jurisdictions. Without that, people can just move across a state line and enroll all over again, completely undetected.
And what about the skimming crisis? That seems like a tech update to the carbs themselves.
It's inexcusable that most of these EBT cards still lack the most basic security features. Requiring states to issue cards with EMV chips, the standard chip and pen technology on pretty much every credit and debit card you have, is a total no-brainer.
Right.
This technology makes the cards nearly impossible to clone or skim. Yet only California and Oklahoma are even transitioning to this standard right now.
And finally, those eligibility loopholes that let people with significant assets qualify.
That goes back to the controversial broad-based categorical eligibility rules. We just need tighter controls. Implementing the 2020 rule to close these loopholes would stop people with higher incomes or, substantial assets from qualifying. Estimates suggest that alone could save about $2.5 billion a year.
So just making sure the program serves who it's supposed to serve.
Exactly. And on top of that, we should let states keep more of the funds they recover when they do detect fraud. Give them a direct financial reward for doing a good job. Reinforce that positive incentive we've been talking about.
So what does this all mean? We've really laid bare a fundamental accountability gap in the SNP program. State management varies wildly, costing taxpayers over $10 billion a year. When the federal government tried to get transparency with data, they found staggering levels of fraud. 300,000 deceased people on the rolls. Yet every single attempt to enforce fiscal responsibility, whether it's through data or cost sharing, is met with legal resistance or political games that sometimes lead to these absurd policies that actually reward failure.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought for you to consider. If the federal government is willing to design policy that explicitly exempts the states with the highest error rates from paying their fair share, are we really funding a vital safety net that demands efficiency? Or are we just subsidizing financial mismanagement and administrative incompetence in the very places least capable of handling taxpayer money? The incentive structure right now is designed to tolerate failure. And until that changes, billions will just keep flowing right out the door.